My son moved his family into my beach house and told me they were converting it into an Airbnb rental. He said, "You're too old to maintain it anyway. This is a business opportunity." I smiled, nodded, and wished him luck with his new venture. When he launched his booking site, I prepared a surprise that would shut down his entire operation before the first guest ever arrived. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled my truck into the gravel lot at Hatteras Harbor Marina, the salt air already working its familiar magic on my mood. 4 days in my beach house on the Outer Banks, exactly what I needed after another exhausting month managing rental properties back in Charlotte. The 5-hour drive down Highway 64 had been worth it just to see the Atlantic stretching endless before me. But something wasn't right. A white Mercedes SUV sat in my driveway, the kind with dealer plates still attached. Through the floor to ceiling windows I'd installed myself 20 years ago, I could see people moving around inside my house. My son Brian stood on the deck overlooking the ocean, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly. Beside him, his wife Vanessa adjusted what looked like a professional camera on a tripod. What the hell? I grabbed my weekend bag and headed for the front door. The lock turned smoothly with my key, but I'd barely stepped inside when Brian's voice cut across the open-plan living room. "Dad, what are you doing here?" The question hit me wrong. This was my house. The deed had my name on it, bought with money I'd earned from 30 years of managing insurance portfolios and risk assessments. Sarah and I had picked out every piece of driftwood decor, every nautical painting, every weathered shingle on the exterior. I own this place, Brian. I don't need permission to visit my own property. Vanessa lowered her camera with an exasperated sigh. "Robert, we told you we were doing the photo shoot this weekend. You can't just show up unannounced." "Photo shoot?" I set my bag down slowly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Professional lighting equipment filled one corner. Vanessa had rearranged all the furniture, pushing Sarah's favorite reading chair into storage and replacing it with some modern monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. "Nobody told me anything," I said carefully. "What photo shoot?" Brian pocketed his phone and crossed his arms, looking every bit like the entitled 42-year-old who'd somehow forgotten his father had worked himself to exhaustion to pay for his MBA. "The listing photos. For the rental business." "What rental business?" "The Airbnb." Vanessa spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "We've been planning this for months. Brian and I are converting the beach house into a premium vacation rental. The income potential is incredible." The room tilted slightly. I steadied myself against the kitchen counter, the granite cool under my palm. "This is my house." "Right, but you barely use it." Brian's tone had shifted to his business negotiation voice, the one he probably used on clients at his marketing firm. "You come down maybe 6 times a year. The rest of the time it just sits empty. That's wasted asset potential." Wasted asset potential. As if the place where Sarah and I had celebrated 25 wedding anniversaries, where we'd scattered her ashes from the deck 4 years ago, where I still came to feel close to her memory, was nothing more than unused inventory. "You should have asked me first," I managed. Vanessa laughed. Actually laughed. "Ask permission to help you maximize your property value? Robert, you're being ridiculous. This is a win-win situation. We handle all the management. You get passive income. I don't want passive income from this house." "Well, that's just foolish." Brian walked to the windows, surveying the ocean view like he was already calculating nightly rates. "Do you have any idea what premium beachfront properties rent for during summer season? We could clear $3,000 a week easy. That's over $100,000 a year." The numbers meant nothing to me. I had plenty of money from my insurance career, from the Charlotte properties, from careful investing over 4 decades. What I didn't have was my wife anymore, and this house was the last place where I could still hear her voice in the sound of waves against sand. "No," I said kindly. "I'm not turning this into a rental." Brian spun around, his face darkening. "Dad, be reasonable. You're 64 years old. How much longer are you realistically going to be able to maintain a beach house? The property taxes alone are killing you." "I can afford the taxes." "That's not the point." Vanessa set up another camera angle, not even looking at me as she spoke. "The point is efficiency. Brian and I have already set up the LLC, designed the marketing materials, and scheduled a property manager. We launch next week." The presumption took my breath away. They'd already created a business structure around my property, already made plans to commercialize the one place that still held Sarah's presence, already decided my opinions were irrelevant. Brian, I kept my voice level through sheer force of will. This is my house. You don't have the right to make these decisions. Actually, we kind of do. He pulled out his phone, tapping through screens. Vanessa's brother is a real estate attorney. He helped us establish the management company. Since you're clearly not maintaining the property to its full potential, and since we're family, we have certain legal grounds. Legal grounds to steal my property. My son, who I'd raised and supported through every mistake and setback, was actually threatening legal action to take my beach house. Get out, I said. Brian's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? Get out of my house. Now. Take your cameras and your equipment and your business plans and leave. Vanessa's expression shifted to something ugly. You're making a huge mistake. We've already invested thousands in setup costs, professional photos, LLC filing fees, website development. You owe us. I owe you nothing. You did all of that without my permission. Fine. Brian's face flushed red. Fine. We'll leave. But this isn't over, Dad. Vanessa's right. You're being selfish and short-sighted. When you're too old to drive down here anymore, when medical bills start piling up, you're going to regret turning down this opportunity. They pack their equipment with aggressive efficiency, slamming cases and muttering to each other just loud enough for me to hear fragments. Ungrateful, stubborn old fool. Should have expected this. The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood alone in my beach house, surrounded by rearranged furniture and lingering resentment, trying to understand what had just happened. Sarah's voice whispered from memory. Brian's ambitious, Robert. He gets that from you. Just give him time to mature. 4 years since her death. And I'd given Brian nothing but time, support, and money. I'd paid off his student loans when his marketing business struggled. I'd co-signed the loan for that Mercedes SUV in the driveway. I'd written a check for $30,000 when Vanessa's boutique failed and they faced bankruptcy. And this was how he repaid me. By trying to turn my sanctuary into a business asset. The weekend passed in uneasy silence. I tried to relax, tried to enjoy the ocean view and the familiar rhythms of the Outer Banks. But every time I looked at the furniture arrangement, at the spots where Vanessa's lighting equipment had scuffed the hardwood, I felt the betrayal fresh. Monday afternoon, back in Charlotte, my phone rang. Brian's name on the display. Dad, we need to talk about Friday. The lack of apology in his voice made something harden in my chest. What about it? You overreacted. Vanessa and I were just trying to help you maximize an underutilized asset. The way you threw us out was completely inappropriate. Inappropriate. As if I'd committed some social faux pas by objecting to theft of my property. Brian, you tried to take my house without asking. How exactly should I have reacted? It's not taking, it's managing. There's a difference. Papers rustled in the background. Look, Vanessa and I talked to her brother again. He says we have grounds for a partition action. Since you're clearly unable to properly maintain the property, and we're willing to take over management responsibilities, a judge might rule in our favor. The legal threat landed like a punch. My own son was actually considering suing me for my beach house. Don't do this, Brian. Then work with us. Let us launch the rental business. We'll give you 40% of the gross revenue. That's more than fair. It's my house. I should get 100% of any revenue, which I don't want in the first place. Fine. 50% then. But that's our final offer. Brian, there is no deal. The house isn't becoming a rental. His voice dropped to something colder. You're being irrational. When Mom died, you should have downsized. Instead, you're clinging to properties you can't maintain, making emotional decisions instead of practical ones. Frankly, it's embarrassing. The insult stung more than it should have. After Sarah's death, I had struggled. The grief had been overwhelming, the loneliness crushing. For months I'd barely functioned, going through motions at work, coming home to an empty house that echoed with her absence. Brian had visited exactly 3 times that first year. 3 times in 12 months, each visit shorter than the last, each one ending with him checking his phone and making excuses about getting back to work. But I'd kept paying his bills. Kept being the ATM he could draw from whenever Vanessa's latest business idea needed funding. I'm hanging up now, I said quietly. Wait, Dad, don't be stubborn about this. Vanessa's already started taking bookings. We have 3 reservations for July 4th weekend. Premium guests willing to pay $4,000 for the week. They'd already started booking, taking reservations for my property, listing it on rental sites, marketing my house without my consent. Cancel them. We can't cancel. That would destroy our reputation on the platform. These guests are counting on us. Brian, I'm warning you. Cancel those reservations. Or what? The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. What exactly are you going to do about it, Dad? I hung up. Sleep proved impossible that night. I sat in my home office in Charlotte, looking at photos of Sarah on my desk, trying to figure out when I'd become such a pushover. When had I stopped being the man who'd built a successful insurance career through sharp analysis and firm negotiation, and become the aging widower who let his son walk all over him? Tuesday morning brought clarity with the sunrise. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began doing what I'd done professionally for 30 years: risk assessment and mitigation. First, I pulled up the property records for my Outer Banks house. Everything was in my name alone. Sarah and I had structured it that way for estate planning purposes. Brian had no legal claim whatsoever. Second, I Googled Beach House Airbnb, LLC Outer Banks. It took less than 5 minutes to find the listing. Luxury beachfront retreat at Hatteras, complete with professional photos Vanessa must have taken after I left. The description promised premium oceanfront access, modern amenities, sleeps 8. My house, listed publicly, already accepting reservations for dates starting June 15th, just 3 weeks away. The rage I felt was cold and calculating. This wasn't emotional anymore. This was business, and business was something I understood perfectly. I picked up the phone and called Jack Morrison, my attorney for 20 years. Jack had handled my divorce from my first wife, managed my estate planning after Sarah's death, and reviewed every major financial decision I'd made since 1998. Robert, good to hear from you. What's going on? I need you to review a property situation. My son is attempting to commercialize my beach house without my consent. Jack's pause was telling. Tell me everything. I spent 30 minutes laying out the facts. Brian's presumption, the LLC formation, the active Airbnb listing, the threatened partition action. Robert, Jack said when I finished, this is attempted fraud. He has no authority to rent your property. The LLC structure is meaningless if he doesn't own the asset. Can he actually sue for partition? Technically, anyone can sue for anything. But partition actions typically apply to inherited or jointly owned properties. Since you're the sole owner and still alive, he'd have no standing. Any attorney with basic competency would tell him that. Vanessa's brother is supposedly a real estate attorney. Jack snorted. Then he's either incompetent or complicit in fraud. Probably both. Here's what we do. I'll draft a cease and desist letter demanding he remove the listing immediately. We'll also send notice to Airbnb directly. If he doesn't comply within 48 hours, we file for an injunction and pursue charges for attempted fraud and elder abuse. Elder abuse. The term made me wince, but Jack was right. Taking advantage of a parent's property while threatening legal action qualified. Do it, I said. There's one more thing we should discuss. Jack's tone shifted to careful. If Brian is this brazen about the beach house, you need to consider broader estate protection. Have you updated your will recently? I hadn't. After Sarah died, I'd left everything structured to pass to Brian as my only child. The beach house, the Charlotte rental properties, the investment accounts. Everything would go to him automatically. Schedule a meeting, I told Jack. This week. I want to review all of it. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in Jack's conference room, reviewing documents that would change my entire estate plan. My attorney had brought in Patricia Chen, a specialist in elder law and asset protection. The challenge, Patricia explained, spreading papers across the polished table, is that your son is clearly viewing your assets as his future inheritance, rather than your current property. He's operating from a place of entitlement. So, how do I protect myself? Several strategies. First, we transfer the beach house into an irrevocable trust with you as the primary beneficiary. This removes it from your personal ownership, making it impossible for anyone to claim management rights. Jack jumped in. We can also establish clear terms that prevent the property from being commercialized. The trust documents would specify it remains a private residence during your lifetime. What happens after I die? Patricia adjusted her glasses. That's where it gets interesting. You have options. The property could pass to a charitable organization, could be sold with proceeds going to designated beneficiaries, or could even be maintained as a memorial. The key is that Brian would have no automatic claim. The satisfaction I felt was complicated. This was my son I was essentially disinheriting, the boy I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, walked through heartbreak and failure. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He was a 42-year-old man who saw his aging father as an obstacle to profit rather than a person deserving respect. Do it, I said. All of it. The trust, the restrictions, everything. There's one more element we should consider, Jack said carefully. The Airbnb listing is still active. Your cease and desist letter goes out today, but Brian might not comply immediately. We need to think about what happens if he actually allows guests to occupy your property. I'd been considering this exact problem since Monday night. Brian was stubborn enough and arrogant enough to ignore the legal warning, especially if he'd already collected deposits from guests. What if guests show up and discover the reservation was fraudulent? I asked. Patricia smiled slightly. That would be extremely embarrassing for your son's rental business. Reputation is everything in the vacation rental industry. One bad incident could destroy his credibility on the platform. An idea had been forming since yesterday, sharpening with each hour of planning. I'd spent 30 years in insurance analyzing risk scenarios and preparing for worst-case outcomes. This situation required the same methodical approach. Jack, what's the legal status if I'm physically present at the property when fraudulent guests arrive? My attorney leaned back, studying me with interest. You'd be well within your rights to deny them entry. It's your property. You didn't authorize the rental. Any reservation would be invalid. The guests would have to seek recourse against whoever took their money, which would be Brian's LLC. Exactly. He'd be liable for fraud, breach of contract, probably theft by deception. The guests could sue him personally, and the platforms would ban his operation permanently. Patricia added, You could also file a police report for trespassing if they attempted to enter without your permission. That would create a criminal record of the incident. The plan crystallized fully. Let Brian think his cease and desist letter was just an empty threat from an overprotective father. Let him proceed with his first reservation. Then ensure that reservation became such a disaster that it destroyed not just his Airbnb business, but his credibility as a businessman entirely. Thursday evening, I drove back down to the Outer Banks. The 5-hour journey gave me plenty of time to refine my strategy. Highway 64 stretched through eastern North Carolina's flat landscape, past small towns and pine forests, while I mentally rehearsed every step of what would happen in 2 weeks. The beach house welcomed me like an old friend. I spent Friday installing new security cameras at every entrance, systems that would record everything and upload to cloud storage Brian couldn't access. I documented the current condition of every room, photographing Sarah's belongings, the furniture arrangements, every detail that mattered. Saturday, I drove into town and visited the Dare County Sheriff's Office. A deputy named Rodriguez listened to my story with increasing concern. Sir, you're saying your son is illegally renting your property? That's correct. My attorney has sent a cease and desist letter, but I believe he intends to proceed with reservations anyway. The first guests are scheduled to arrive June 15th. Rodriguez made notes. And you want to be present when they arrive? I do. I want to personally inform them that the reservation is fraudulent and deny them entry to my property. I'm concerned they might become aggressive when they realize they've been scammed. That's smart thinking. Rodriguez pulled out a card. Here's what we'll do. Call this number when the guests arrive. We'll have a deputy there within minutes to ensure everything stays peaceful. You have every right to protect your property. By Sunday, everything was prepared. The cameras were operational. The sheriff's office was briefed. Jack had sent the cease and desist letter, which Brian had responded to with a tersely worded email, claiming he had implicit management rights and wouldn't be canceling any reservations. Perfect. I settled in to wait. The days passed slowly. I worked remotely from the beach house, handling my Charlotte rental properties via phone and email. Every morning I walked the beach where Sarah and I had walked together hundreds of times, feeling her presence in the salt wind and endless waves. She would have been horrified by Brian's behavior. Sarah had always worried he was too focused on money, too quick to see opportunities instead of relationships. But she'd also believed people could change, could learn to value what really mattered. I didn't have that faith anymore. Brian had made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. June 14th arrived with perfect beach weather. Clear skies, gentle surf, temperatures in the mid-70s. Ideal conditions for tourists expecting a luxury vacation. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. Guests check in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Don't interfere. I smiled and typed back. Looking forward to it. Friday, June 15th. I woke at dawn and did a final check of all my preparations. Cameras recording. Sheriff's number programmed into speed dial. Documentation folder ready with property deed, Jack's cease and desist letter, and photos of every room. At 2:45 p.m., a silver minivan pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as a family emerged. Parents in their 40s, 3 kids ranging from maybe 8 to 14. The father stretched and surveyed the house with satisfaction while the mother started organizing luggage. They looked like nice people, hard-working folks who'd saved up for a special beach vacation, about to discover they'd been scammed by my son. I felt a moment of sympathy for what they were about to experience. But they were ultimately victims of Brian's fraud, not mine. Better they learn the truth now than after they'd unpacked. At exactly 2:50 p.m., I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The father noticed me first. His smile was friendly, expecting a handoff meeting with the property owner, perhaps. Hi there. We're the Martinez family. We have a reservation for this week. I'm Robert Mitchell. I own this house. His smile faltered. Oh, great. So you're the host? No, I'm not hosting anyone. There is no legitimate reservation. This property is not available for rent. The mother joined her husband, confusion creasing her face. I don't understand. We booked through Airbnb. We have a confirmation number. We paid a deposit. I kept my voice gentle but firm. I'm very sorry, but whoever took your money did so fraudulently. I never authorized any rental. This is my private residence. But, the father pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically. The listing said luxury beachfront retreat. The photos showed this exact house. Those photos were taken without my permission by someone who has no authority to rent this property. I've sent a cease and desist letter to the person running that listing. Any reservation is invalid. The mother's face was pale now. We paid $3,500. We drove 8 hours from Pennsylvania. The kids have been looking forward to this for months. My chest tightened with sympathy. This was the real damage of Brian's fraud. Not just violated property rights, but ruined vacations, disappointed children, money lost by people who couldn't afford to lose it. I truly am sorry. You're victims of fraud. The person who took your money is my son, and he had no right to rent this property. Your son? The father's confusion was shifting to anger. This is some kind of family dispute? It's theft. He's trying to commercialize my property against my will. You'll need to contact Airbnb for a refund and pursue legal action against the host. The mother was on her phone now, calling someone. The kids had gotten out of the van, sensing something was wrong. The oldest, a teenage girl, looked close to tears. I hated this. Hated being the bearer of bad news. Hated watching their vacation dreams collapse. But Brian had created this situation, not me. I'm calling the police, the father announced. This is fraud. I agree completely. In fact, I've already contacted the Dare County Sheriff's Office. There's a deputy on standby. Right on cue, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. Deputy Rodriguez emerged, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. Mr. Mitchell, these are the guests you mentioned? Yes. The Martinez family. They were scammed into believing they had a legitimate reservation. Rodriguez turned to the family with professional sympathy. Folks, I'm sorry to say Mr. Mitchell is correct. This property is not legally available for rent. Whoever took your money committed fraud. You'll need to file a report. The mother was crying now, one hand over her mouth. The father's jaw was clenched, his hands shaking with restrained fury. This family's vacation was destroyed. Their trust in people was shattered. All because Brian wanted to make money off my property. Rodriguez spent 20 minutes taking statements and explaining the next steps. File a complaint with Airbnb. Submit a police report. Consider small claims court against the fraudulent host. The Martinez family would eventually get their money back, but their vacation was gone. As they loaded back into their minivan, the teenage daughter shot me a look of pure hurt, like I was somehow responsible for this disaster, when all I'd done was protect my own property. The minivan pulled away, and I stood on my porch feeling sick. Tough situation, Rodriguez said quietly. But you did the right thing. This needed to be documented. Will they get their money back? Eventually. Airbnb has protections for this kind of fraud, and your son is going to face serious consequences. Rodriguez tapped his report folder. This is documented fraud now. The platform will ban him. The family can sue him. And depending on how many other victims there are, he could face criminal charges. Criminal charges. My son could end up with a record because of his arrogance and greed. Sarah's voice whispered from memory, but I pushed it away. I hadn't created this situation. Brian had. He'd chosen to commit fraud. These were simply the consequences of that choice. My phone rang as Rodriguez drove away. Brian, of course. What the hell did you just do? I protected my property from fraudulent use. Those people drove 8 hours. They had kids with them. You just traumatized an entire family. The hypocrisy was stunning. I traumatized them? Brian, you took their money under false pretenses. You promised them a vacation you had no authority to provide. This is your fault, not mine. The cops are calling me about a fraud complaint. Good. You committed fraud. You should be called about it. Dad, you have to fix this. Call them back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Let them stay the week. Absolutely not. You're being insane. Brian's voice climbed toward hysteria. Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation? We have 6 more reservations scheduled for the summer. This kills all of them. Then you should have asked my permission before creating a rental business with my property. I'll sue you. I swear to God, I will take you to court and I will win. Try it. Jack Morrison would love to depose you about your fraudulent LLC operation. The silence stretched long enough that I thought he'd hung up. When Brian spoke again, his voice was cold with venom. You're a bitter, lonely old man who's going to die alone because you pushed away everyone who tried to help you. Mom would be ashamed. He hung up before I could respond. I stood on my deck, looking out at the Atlantic, trying to steady my breathing. The invocation of Sarah's memory hurt. But I knew the truth. Sarah would have been appalled by Brian's behavior, by his willingness to exploit his father's property and scam innocent families. That evening, I sat on the deck with a bourbon and watched the sunset. The Martinez family was somewhere on the road back to Pennsylvania, their vacation ruined, their kids disappointed. Other families would get refund notifications for their summer reservations. Brian's rental business was destroyed before it really began. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Jack to finalize the trust paperwork. The beach house would be permanently protected from commercialization. Brian would receive nothing from my estate except perhaps a lesson about respecting other people's boundaries. The ocean rolled steady and eternal, indifferent to human drama. Sarah and I had sat in these exact chairs hundreds of times, talking about retirement plans and grandkids we'd never gotten to spoil. She died before Brian turned into this version of himself. Maybe that was a mercy. My phone buzzed with an email from Airbnb. Your property has been reported for fraudulent listing. We've removed the listing and banned the host permanently. If you are the property owner and did not authorize this rental activity, you may pursue legal action. Perfect. Another email, this one from Jack Morrison. Trust documents are ready for signature. Also received angry call from Brian's attorney, Vanessa's brother. Threatened to sue for intentional interference with business. I told him to bring it. This will be fun. I smiled despite everything. Jack had always enjoyed a good legal fight. Saturday morning brought unexpected visitors. Brian's Mercedes pulled into the driveway at 9 a.m., followed by a pickup truck I didn't recognize. Brian emerged from the driver's side, Vanessa from passenger. 2 younger people I vaguely recognized as their kids, Tyler and Madison, climbed out of the truck. I met them on the porch, coffee in hand. We need to talk, Brian announced. No greeting, no acknowledgement of the fraud situation, just demands, same as always. About what? About fixing this disaster you created. Vanessa's voice was sharp. You've destroyed our business, embarrassed us in front of clients, cost us thousands in refunds. You destroyed your own business by committing fraud. Tyler stepped forward. He was 24, fresh out of business school with Brian's same entitled confidence. Grandpa, you don't understand modern sharing economy principles. Underutilized assets should be monetized. It's just smart resource management. It's my resource. I'll manage it however I want. Madison, 22 and working in Vanessa's latest boutique venture, tried a different approach. Grandpa, families should support each other's entrepreneurial ventures. This beach house could benefit everyone. The generational arrogance was breathtaking. 4 people standing on my property, in front of my house, lecturing me about how I should let them profit from my assets. The answer is no. The listing is gone. The business is over. Accept it and leave. We're not leaving until you agree to let us relaunch the rental business, Brian said. We've already lined up replacement guests for July. All we need is your signature on a management agreement. He actually held out paperwork, as if I would simply sign over my property after everything that had happened. Brian, listen very carefully. This house is being transferred into an irrevocable trust that specifically prohibits commercial use. Even if I wanted to rent it, which I don't, it will be legally impossible. You have no business opportunity here. None. Vanessa's face contorted with rage. You can't do that. We've invested our savings in this venture. Website development, professional photography, insurance policies. You're stealing from us. You invested in fraud. That's your problem, not mine. Dad. Brian's voice dropped to something more dangerous. If you do this trust thing, you're cutting me out of my inheritance. That beach house should be mine when you die. Should it? Based on what? Your attempt to steal it while I'm still alive? Tyler jumped in. Grandpa, statistically, you probably have 15 to 20 years left max. Why are you being selfish with assets you won't even be around to use? The casual dismissal of my remaining life expectancy, spoken by my own grandson, crystallized everything wrong with this family dynamic. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and my assets, already planning how to spend my money before I was cold. Get off my property. All of you. Now. Or what? Brian challenged. You'll call the cops again? Embarrass your own family in front of more strangers? Yes. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Rodriguez answered on the second ring. Deputy Rodriguez? Robert Mitchell. I have 4 people trespassing on my property who refuse to leave despite being asked. Can you send someone? Brian's face went white. You're not seriously calling the police on your own son. You're not seriously trying to steal my house. I kept Rodriguez on the line while we waited. Brian, Vanessa, Tyler, and Madison stood frozen on my porch, apparently unable to believe I'd actually follow through. The same way they'd been unable to believe I'd turn away the Martinez family, unable to believe I'd destroy their rental business, unable to believe I had any backbone at all. The cruiser arrived within 5 minutes. Rodriguez emerged with another deputy, both of them taking in the scene with professional assessment. Mr. Mitchell, these folks giving you trouble? They're trespassing. I've asked them to leave multiple times. They're refusing. Rodriguez turned to Brian. Sir, is this your property? He's my father. That wasn't the question. Do you own this property? Brian's jaw worked silently. No, but then you're trespassing if the owner wants you to leave. I'm asking you once to vacate the premises. If you refuse, you'll be arrested. Vanessa grabbed Brian's arm. Let's just go. This is insane. Listen to your wife, Rodriguez said. Nothing good happens if I have to ask twice. They left, loaded into their vehicles with furious efficiency and peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying behind their tires. Tyler shot me one final look of pure betrayal as they drove away. I stood on my porch with 2 sheriff's deputies, watching my family disappear down the coastal road, wondering when exactly everything had gone so completely wrong. Sir, Rodriguez said gently, you okay? No, but I will be. Monday morning in Jack Morrison's office, I signed the trust documents that permanently protected my beach house from commercial use. Patricia Chen witnessed the signatures while Jack notarized everything with efficient precision. This is irrevocable, Patricia reminded me. Once these documents are filed, even you can't change the terms. The property stays private residential use only, passes to the designated conservation trust upon your death. I understand. Your son won't inherit any of it. I know. Jack set down his pen. Robert, I have to ask, are you certain this is what you want? Disinheriting your only child is a significant decision. I thought about Brian's attempt to steal my house, about Vanessa rearranging Sarah's furniture without permission, about Tyler calculating my remaining life expectancy like a business asset depreciation schedule, about Madison lecturing me on family support while participating in fraud. I'm certain. The documents were filed that afternoon. By Tuesday, the beach house legally belonged to the Mitchell Family Conservation Trust, with ironclad restrictions preventing any commercial use. I retained lifetime occupancy rights, but after my death, the property would transfer to the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust for preservation. Brian would never profit from it. Neither would Vanessa, Tyler, or Madison. The beach house where Sarah and I had built our best memories would remain a private sanctuary, protected from the greed that had destroyed my relationship with my son. Wednesday brought an email from Airbnb's legal department. They'd investigated the fraudulent listing, processed full refunds for all affected guests, and permanently banned Brian's account. They were also pursuing legal action to recover their costs, which included not just the refunds, but also platform integrity damages. Brian's rental business had lasted exactly 2 weeks from launch to total collapse. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd spend months planning and investing in a venture that imploded the moment it encountered actual legal ownership rights. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown Charlotte number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Amanda Foster with the North Carolina Department of Insurance. I'm calling about a complaint filed regarding your son, Brian Mitchell." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" "Mr. Mitchell operates a marketing consulting firm, correct? We've received reports that he's been misrepresenting insurance products to clients. Specifically, making claims about coverage and benefits that don't align with actual policy terms. The insurance fraud investigation would ruin Brian's entire business, not just his Airbnb scam. Everything he'd built through his marketing firm would collapse under regulatory scrutiny." "I didn't file that complaint," I said carefully. "No, sir. It came from one of his former clients. But given your background in the insurance industry, we hoped you might provide insight into whether these allegations have merit." I should have felt satisfaction. This was karma catching up to Brian's pattern of cutting corners and misrepresenting facts. But mostly I just felt tired. "Miss Foster, I can't comment on my son's business practices. That would be a conflict of interest." "Understood. Thank you for your time." The call ended, but the implications lingered. Brian's marketing firm specialized in insurance and financial services consulting. If he'd been making fraudulent claims to clients the same way he'd made fraudulent rental listings, his entire career was about to implode. Part of me wanted to warn him. The father in me that had raised him, taught him to ride a bike, walked him through heartbreak and failure. But another part recognized that Brian had created this situation through his own choices. He'd always operated in ethical gray areas, always pushed boundaries, always assumed he was smarter than the rules. Eventually that attitude catches up with everyone. Friday evening, I drove back down to the Outer Banks. The 5-hour drive felt different this time. Not escape from Charlotte, but arrival at a place that truly belonged to me again. Protected, secured mina. The beach house welcomed me with familiar silence. I walked through rooms that held decades of memories, running my hand along furniture Sarah had picked out, standing in spots where we'd danced on New Year's Eve, looking out windows where we'd watched storms roll in from the Atlantic. This place was worth fighting for, worth burning bridges with my son, worth the loneliness that came with setting boundaries. Saturday morning, I walked the beach at sunrise. The same walk Sarah and I had taken countless times, our footprints washing away with each wave while the ocean rolled eternal and indifferent. My phone buzzed with a text. "Brian, the state is investigating my business. This is your fault. You've destroyed my life. I hope you're satisfied." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, wanted to explain that his life was destroyed by his own choices, his own fraud, his own arrogance. But what was the point? Brian had never accepted responsibility for anything. He wouldn't start now. I deleted the message and kept walking. Sunday afternoon, Jack Morrison called. "Robert, I thought you'd want to know. Brian's attorney just withdrew the partition lawsuit. Apparently, they did some actual legal research and realized they had no standing whatsoever. That's good news. Better news. Airbnb recovered their costs by placing a lien on Brian's assets. Between the refunds, the platform damages, and the legal fees, he's looking at about $60,000 in liabilities. His rental business didn't just fail, it bankrupted him. $60,000. More than I'd given him over the past 4 years in various bailouts and loans. Money he'd never paid back, never even acknowledged as gifts, rather than entitlements. What about the insurance investigation? Jack's pause was telling. That's moving forward. 3 clients have come forward with complaints about misrepresentation. If the department finds evidence of fraud, Brian could lose his licenses. His marketing firm would essentially be finished. My son's entire career, collapsing under the weight of shortcuts and lies he'd told to make money faster. The same pattern that had led him to try stealing my house. Jack, I need to ask you something. Am I wrong for not helping him? Wrong how? He's my son. He's facing bankruptcy and possibly criminal charges. Should I bail him out one more time? The silence stretched long enough that I thought the connection had dropped. When Jack finally spoke, his voice was careful. Robert, I've known you for 20 years. In that time, I've watched you bail out Brian at least a dozen times. Student loans, business failures, medical bills, car loans, legal fees when he got that DUI. How many times has he thanked you? That's not the point, isn't it? Gratitude aside, has bailing him out ever actually helped? Has he learned from any of these mistakes, or has he just learned that you'll always catch him? The question hit harder than it should have. Because Jack was right. Every time I'd rescued Brian, he'd just repeated the same patterns with slightly different details. The MBA I'd paid for led to a failed consulting business. The wedding I'd funded led to Vanessa's endless boutique disasters. The debt consolidation loan led to new debts. He's facing real consequences now, Jack continued. Maybe for the first time in his life. Consequences you didn't create, that you can't fix. Maybe the kindest thing you can do is let him actually experience them. I thought about the Martinez family, their vacation destroyed. About other families who'd booked reservations, their summer plans disrupted. About Brian's clients who'd trusted his insurance advice, only to discover it was fraudulent. How many people had Brian hurt in his pursuit of easy money? How many victims would there be if he never faced consequences? You're right, I said finally. He needs to fix this himself. Monday afternoon brought another text from Brian. I'm losing the business. Everything I built. Because you couldn't just let me rent your stupid beach house. The revisionist history was almost impressive. Somehow, in Brian's mind, his insurance fraud investigation, his bankruptcy, his failed rental business were all my fault for protecting my own property. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on the simplest truth. You did this to yourself. His reply was instant. I never want to see you again. You're dead to me. I read the message 3 times, feeling something break and mend simultaneously in my chest. The son I'd raised was gone, replaced by this entitled stranger who saw people as resources to exploit. Cutting ties hurt, but holding on hurt worse. I blocked his number. Tuesday, I drove to the North Carolina Coastal Land Trust office in Manteo. The director, a weathered woman in her 50s named Karen Walsh, met me with enthusiasm. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming in. We're honored you've chosen to partner with us for your property's conservation. I want to make sure it's protected properly after I'm gone. Karen spread maps across her desk, showing the ecological significance of my stretch of beach. Turtle nesting habitat, bird migration corridor, native dune vegetation. This property has significant conservation value, she explained. By placing it in trust, you're ensuring it remains undeveloped in perpetuity. No commercialization, no subdivision, no destruction of habitat. That's exactly what I want. May I ask what motivated this decision? I thought about how to explain without revealing the full family drama. Someone tried to turn it into a rental business. Made me realize how fragile these places are, how easily greed can destroy something beautiful. Karen nodded with understanding. We see it constantly. Development pressure is enormous on the Outer Banks. Thank you for choosing preservation over profit. Over profit. The phrase captured everything. Brian had chosen profit. Chosen easy money over relationships. Short-term gain over long-term respect. And in the process, he'd lost both the money and the relationships. I signed the conservation easement documents, ensuring my beach house would remain exactly what Sarah and I had dreamed it would be. A sanctuary. A place of peace. A reminder that some things matter more than money. Wednesday morning, I woke in my beach house to perfect silence. No phone calls demanding money. No texts threatening lawsuits. No family drama disrupting the simple rhythm of waves against sand. For the first time since Sarah's death 4 years ago, I felt completely at peace. I made coffee and sat on the deck watching pelicans dive for fish. The ocean stretched endless before me, the same view Sarah and I had treasured, now permanently protected from the greed that had nearly destroyed it. My phone buzzed with an email from Jack Morrison. For your information, Brian filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy this morning. Airbnb lien, 3 client lawsuits, and the state investigation wiped him out. He'll recover eventually, but it'll take years. You made the right call not bailing him out. Bankruptcy. My son, who'd been so confident in his business acumen, so certain he could monetize my assets better than I could, had crashed and burned spectacularly. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something more complicated. Sadness for what we'd lost. Relief that I'd finally set boundaries. Acceptance that some relationships can't survive growth and self-respect. Sarah's voice whispered from memory, clearer now than it had been in months. You did good, Robert. You protected what matters. I'm proud of you. The afternoon passed in peaceful solitude. I walked the beach, collected shells, watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink that Sarah had always loved. The house felt full of her presence again, as if protecting it from Brian's commercialization had somehow restored her spirit to this place. Thursday brought surprising news. Karen Walsh called with excitement in her voice. Robert, I wanted you to know. Your conservation easement inspired another local property owner. The family, 3 houses down, just contacted us about placing their beachfront in trust. They said your decision made them realize they could protect their land the same way. The ripple effect of standing firm. By protecting my small piece of coastline, I'd inadvertently protected more. Sometimes the right decision creates momentum beyond what you could imagine. Friday afternoon, I sat on my deck with bourbon and a view that hadn't changed in 20 years. The same ocean, the same sky, the same fundamental peace that had drawn Sarah and me to this place originally. My phone was silent. Brian's number blocked. Tyler and Madison had never reached out. Vanessa had presumably moved on to her next business disaster without my financial support. I was alone, truly alone in ways I hadn't been since Sarah died. But this loneliness felt different. Not the crushing grief of widowhood, but the clean solitude of boundaries properly set. Space without chaos. Peace without exploitation. The sunset painted fire across the water while I raised my glass in silent toast. To Sarah, whose memory deserved protection. To the Martinez family and others Brian had hurt, who deserved justice. To the conservation trust that would preserve this place forever. And to myself, for finally learning that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just weakness wearing a kind face. Kindness without self-respect isn't kindness. It's surrender. I'd surrendered for 4 years after Sarah died, confusing grief accommodation with actual support, mistaking exploitation for family connection. But that version of me was gone. In his place sat a man who remembered his own worth, who understood that protecting yourself isn't cruelty but health. The ocean rolled eternal and indifferent while I finished my bourbon and watched the day end. Tomorrow I'd wake to the same view, the same peace, the same house that was finally, truly mine again. Some bridges burn, some relationships end, some family ties sever beyond repair. And sometimes that's exactly what healing looks like.